Hello, friends. This is Chandrakant from Akulmach, and welcome to our show. And as usual, let me tell you there is a giveaway that we want to give, and the giveaway is basically based on our collective knowledge. And the knowledge is about how to set up your startup. And as you can see, this is a graph. Step by step, you can actually set up your sales and marketing engine for startup and also for SME. So this is something that we have used to create this beautiful mug which you can use in your calls, during your digital calls, or even during your meetings. It is bright orange in color, which is color of power, and this graphic, which is our collective knowledge, is also visible on the cup. And just in case, if you're a chief executive and looking for ideas, you can refer this mug while also use it for your meetings. So this is a giveaway. To claim your giveaway, we will tell you in the end of our discussion the process and how you can get access to this one. So without further ado, let's go back to our show. Today's guest is Mr. Mike Bradley. He joins us from UK, and he is the Group Chief Strategy Officer of RHF Group and scaleuparena. So let me welcome my friend from UK.
Hello, Chandra. Good to see you again today.
Absolutely, Mike. And the topic for discussion today is about, usually we have all the countries have public sector undertakings. There are parastatals and the government owned companies. And they are also in business along with the private sector. So the discussion today is whether we should allow them to poach ideas from the private sector and become big. That is really the point of discussion today, Mike.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, because, of course, we have to go back to what is the purpose of the public sector. And also, what is the purpose of the private sector? And my personal view, maybe controversially, maybe not, is that the private sector has to thrive, and it has to survive and be successful, because when it succeeds, it generates corporation taxes that it pays on its profits, which then go back into the public sector to provide the services that we all expect of the public sector. So whether that be health, that be local services, regional services, roads, etc. So we have to have a healthy private sector. And the private sector is the funding vehicle for the public sector. And although we know that, there's a great risk that a lot of people think, we want more from the government. We want this from the government. We need more funding. We need more this, more that from the government. Well, of course, whenever we think that, we have to remember that the only money the government has is from the private sector taxes, ultimately. It's one bucket. So if you want more, somebody else is going to go without. So the only way to grow the pie and the amount of tax is for the private sector to succeed. So that on that basis, what is the purpose of the public sector with regard to companies and the private sector? Because obviously the private sector is funding the public sector, but what's the public sector supposed to do for the private sector? And I would suggest that they are there to oil the wheels for the private sector. There is no point at which the public sector should undermine or steal or copy or poach an idea from the private sector and fund it with private sector funds, which actually takes the private sector business out of the equation. So I suggest that we should actually, maybe punish is the wrong word, but we certainly should not allow the public sector, and there should be an outcry from the private sector whenever the public sector seeks to poach an idea from the private sector.
Well, Mike, I think this is required, and I can draw some examples from my own country, which is India. Um, you know, we used to see all these competition between public sector undertakings as well as private players. I can throw some examples like banking sector. So we have a government-owned bank, and we also have a private bank. The customer base remains the same. It's basically the same. 100,000 people, both parties are attacking. So when it comes to banking, both have to compete with each other equally. But then there are areas like oil and gas where the private sector cannot have a lot of funding, whereas the public sector oil and gas outfit may have endless supply of fund. So the level players are not there. So fortunately for Indians, this government, Modi government, is they are not talking about public sector or private sector anymore for last 6 to 7 years now. They are saying public private partnership. So they are changing the paradigm, and they are trying to see if there is a competition, they are trying to resolve it. And I'm sure it is there in all countries. You can talk about how situation is in UK or any other place where you have business.
Yes, I think there are public-private sector partnerships, and these have been undertaken particularly for infrastructure projects, major projects where maybe a hospital has been built on the basis that a supermarket, for example, gets built nearby, or a hypermarket or a shopping centre. So there have been very good things to come out of this. And I'm not saying that all the initiatives are bad, but what I do think is wrong is that sometimes it would seem there are actually proactive approach taken to taking an idea that a private sector organization, innovator, startup, scale up, emerge up company has taken, created something, and then the public sector rolls along with its big purse filled with private sector tax and says, oh, we can fund this, we can market this, we can create it faster, bigger, stronger, make it across the UK. And my contention is, why is the public sector allowed to do that? Why do they believe that's the right thing to do? Wouldn't they be far better for the public purse, for the private sector innovators and entrepreneurs who are risking a lot of personal capital, both monetary and resource, in making sure that these things work? And rather than spending money creating a duplicate within the public sector and throwing millions of rupees or millions of pounds into the bucket to get it going, why not spend a bit of that money investing in the private sector innovator that has come up with the idea? Because ultimately the public purse will benefit. And this is where I think we've got to be very clear where the role is of the private sector and the public sector. And the public sector is there to oil the wheels. It's not there to steal ideas, not there to say we want more money for this. It's there to say, how can we support the economy and employment and enterprise such that we can efficiently, sustainably succeed? And the only way we do that is to actually get behind small business and innovators. And when I say small business, I mean, of course, medium-sized SMEs. It would appear that it's always the easiest approach for the public sector to take the recommendation of going for a large multinational brand. If there's a big construction project, the management consultancies line up and will make all the recommendations. And due to the very process that's used to get involved with that, the small, medium, large SMEs cannot afford the resource to put into the bidding process. So by its very nature, the process that the public sector has for procurement pushes out SMEs. And I don't know what it's like in India. Is it the same in India, Chandra?
Well, we used to have this system where there were thresholds for even qualifications with the government tenders. But lots have changed now. So before I answer this question that you've asked me, I want to give you an update, and you can understand it because the UK was also running the government in India before 1947. So when I speak, you will be able to relate.
I don't remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
Sure. So basically, the telegraph also was implemented by British in India, and there were a lot of copper cables. And when we became a separate country in 1947, we actually took our own journey in our own hand, and then telecom sector boomed in India. If you look at the number of people using the mobile phones, in fact, on an average, the number of mobile phones are more than the population of India. If you just look at it, and the revenue per user is the second lowest in the world because of the volume game. The lowest is obviously China. The second lowest is India. So considering this question at hand, which is private versus public sector undertaking, most of the, in fact, every company which is providing mobility services in India are private sector. Yet, before this onslaught started in 1996, the entire telecom sector was owned by government, because that is how the British created it. We continued it using a government department, and when the private sector came, there was bidding for the airwaves. Private sector got it, and then there was a risk of millions of people getting laid off by the public sector. So the government decided to have a partnership between private and public, because obviously India is a very large country, and all hands on deck are required to work towards the progress. So they have devised a system where the copper wire, I'm just talking technical terms, because unfortunately how we have laid down the copper wires, nobody knows, because it's almost like 150 years old story. So, but we know the signal, if it goes from here, it will reappear somewhere there. So that infrastructure is owned by the public sector undertaking, which is a telecom company, one of the largest in India, and they provide the backbone of all the telecom operators which are operating in airwaves.
So we got a similar system here. We got a similar system in the UK, Chandra. A backbone provider that is in effect supplying the other brands in the marketplace. And of course, the challenge with that is that the quality of the customer experience is governed not by the end supplier, but by the core infrastructure provider. So unless they keep investing in the infrastructure correctly and upgrade to fiber or satellite or low orbit satellite to get delivery of their signal, you end up with, as you rightly say, decades old copper wire, reducing the experience of the client at the end. And this is the challenge we all face. And the other problem with this is that actually it holds the country back, because rather than being able to keep up with the digital power that we need to deliver high definition videos, interactive services. There isn't the capacity in the network. So what was put down 35 years ago to support our telecom infrastructure, which was maybe, if you imagine, like a 2-lane dual carriageway in each direction, without much upgrading, that dual carriageway is now carrying 10 lanes of traffic. So it's a bit like when you go through Bengaluru in the commuter time, and you find that you've got 6 lanes of traffic in one direction going along 2 lanes of road, and we got the same problem with the telco infrastructure, right? And we have similar challenges with regard to the way the public sector works with other services. So you come up with these ideas within the SME environment, and you go to the public sector and say, I want to do this, and it might be the best idea for the whole of the Indian nation, and it's not been done before. But when you go talk to the public sector will say, oh, we can't possibly promote this because we'd be seen to be being biased. But if, however, a large multinational came along, we won't mention who they are, but we all know what they are. If they came along and said, oh, we're planning to do this, we're planning to buy a nice big office in central London and put it full of people, we won't pay any corporation tax in the country, of course, we'll declare that elsewhere, but we will put in this infrastructure, we'll be paying council tax, blah, 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 and they get the green light. But if you as an SME went to the public sector and said, I want to do this, they would say, oh, we can't be biased. Oh, we need to consult the consultants to cover all angles to make sure we've done it fairly. And that, by the very nature of that, cuts out the SME. And I think it's absolutely disgraceful. The SMEs in our countries are 99% of the companies in the nation, pretty much globally. The SMEs are the engine room of economies. They are where future growth is going to come from. They're where future employment is going to come from. They're where innovation is going to come from. And they are where ultimately the taxes to support the public sector are going to come from. So rather than investing this money into public sector empire building and stealing or poaching ideas from the private sector, the public sector should be oiling the wheels and getting behind it. And that should be the primary objective, in my view, of the public sector. There should actually be a mechanism which says, if you steal this from the private sector, basically we will ensure that you can't go any further. Because that is not the objective of the public sector. They are there to service the needs of the population, not to steal the good ideas of the SMEs. That's my view.
Absolutely, Mike. So now I can answer the question that you asked me about the procurement process. So we used to have a tendering process with minimum thresholds, and usually the SMEs are not qualified to participate in any government procurement. And the largest procurement happens in a country like India is with the government. Even a simple thing like toilet papers, they will buy in millions of dollars. So those are the kind of tenders are there. And anything, I'm just quoting an example of the cheapest thing that we are talking about. So usually big servers, big machinery, stationery, pen to be used in office, furniture, they buy in bulk, and because of this they always tend to get the best quality at the lowest price. But to participate
I would contend on that. I would say that they don't necessarily get the best quality. I think they actually get maybe a mediocre quality, and it's not always at the cheapest price. They should get economies of scale, but by the time, there was a picture in my mind. There was a cartoon going round of somebody digging up a road, which of course the public sector is responsible for. So there's one person digging the hole and 10 administrators ticking off the box around the outside the hole. So actually doing things through the public sector is a false economy. It's not cheaper. There's so much administration involved. The very example I can use in the UK some years ago was they were looking at the cost of paracetamol tablets through the supply chain. Now, a packet of paracetamol in the local supermarket would cost you 50 pence, okay, which is what, 35 rupees? By the time it goes through the public sector procurement process and goes to somebody in a hospital, it costs £10. So it is not cheaper to utilize the public sector. Another example I heard of and read earlier this week, I think it might have even been yesterday, was a local cleaning company, an SME cleaning company, has been cleaning the beaches of Highcliffe, just up the road from me at the seaside, for 20 years. And I won't mention the council, but in its wisdom, the local public sector, local government organisation has decided now to bring this in-house, and that company has gone out of business. And I can guarantee you, by the time that same role has been done, it will not be cheaper than that person who was running their company and has been quite happily doing it for 20 years and is now got no job, so is going to need support in some way, shape or form to find something else to do, assuming they can find something else to do. Why is the public sector doing that? They should not be allowed to undermine SME business. That could have been put out to tender for small companies to do that work across the entire area.
So I agree.
There's no efficiency there. There's no sense there. That's actually just ridiculous empire building.
So I agree with you on this one. There should be no direct competition between public sector and private sector. So the example I was, in fact, I fully agree with you when you say that there are governance people which also cost money. So in India, to govern all this tendering process, there were a complete vigilance department, which was an external agency keeping tab of the corruptions which was going on in the tendering. So when I say in theory, best quality at the lowest price, in theory, was not really happening. So the current government, they have shelved the entire tendering process in 2014. Now there is a website exchange which is hosted by the government, and they need something, they put it there, and then anyone, even if you are a single person outfit, if you have something that the government require, you can put your price there, photographs. It's a marketplace which is promoted by the government. So this is a classic example of Indian government where they are not going with the old method. They have completely overnight changed the whole thing, and they brought a lot of transparency, and they are saying we don't need the vigilance department to do that. Let the market drive the price. So I think that is this is one example which I wanted to give you as a remedy for solving this problem between creating competition between public sector and private sector.
That sounds like a brilliant idea, Chandra, and one I hope that our Indian colleagues are talking to the UK organisations about, because that's a model that would make a lot of sense, because also the delivery will be measured by the local people. So if the SME doesn't do a good job, the local people can vote with their feet and say, we're not happy, we want, in the local press, they'll say, not happy the way this work's been done, that company maybe has to get replaced. So there's no need for it to go through a central local government resource. I looked on our local council website the other day, and I thought it'd be interesting to know what actual services they supply. And I kid you not, they have 26 letters of the alphabet, and you have to click the letter to find out what service they supply. Why is the public sector supplying all these items? They should be focusing on the core items that keep the local business, local infrastructure going. They should not be focused on all the other elements that should be and could be tendered out to local SME, self-employed, small businesses that actually can supply employment and enterprise to the local economy and ultimately taxes.
The mantra that we keep hearing in India now for past 7 years, 6 or 7 years, is minimum government, maximum governance. And this is what the government of the day is following. They are not asking people to go to a gazetted officer, get this certification, that certification. They are saying self-certify yourself. And in case you misuse the law, then we'll come behind you. So you should have thorough knowledge. And so the thinking is that people don't want to basically create problem, and they don't want to. So the trust in people is increasing, and I think that is what is happening here. The government says, I trust you. You are the citizen of the country. I trust you. You self-certify yourself.
No, that makes a lot of sense. As a very refreshing approach, one which post-pandemic I think we're all going to have to take, because one thing this pandemic has done is shaken out the finance from every organization, and the public sector has got a major task in front of them, because all the tax that was being generated before has been stalled. And they now have to do what we in the private sector have done for many decades already, which is less is more. Use, to actually achieve more with less resource. And they will have to do this because as we say, they have to cut the cloth, because their wallet size is not the same as it was. So they can't just keep on adding service upon service upon service. They're going to have to actually say, what services do we have to provide? What services can we afford to provide? And what services should be subcontract out to the SMEs who can and will supply that locally and be measured on their results by the voters, by the people who are paying the taxes, which is the way, in my view, it should be.
Absolutely, Mike. I think you have spoken your mind today as a person who is actually helping so many SMEs across the world, and I think these are very valuable inputs. I'm sure some government people. It's not only a problem in UK or India; it's a problem world over. I mean, if you go to Africa,
correct. Yes,
there are
absolutely.
There are UN funding outfits, which are again parastatals, as they call them, government-owned agencies. So things like that. So I think it's a common problem, and government sector undertaking should not be doing what private sector can do best. They should rather focus on governance. I think it's a very good input that you have given us today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but I think you're right. I think the whole world needs to be more efficient, more effective, and remember that actually we're all here to support each other. It's all for one and one for all, as the Three Musketeers used to say. And that means that we have to look for ways to enable and engage everybody so that they can support themselves, not so that we can empire build. Empire building, as we all know, is passé. That doesn't last. It's unsustainable. What is the future is working together, but working together efficiently and effectively to deliver across the entire economy, the entire ecosystem, which, as you rightly say, that's why we've got the ecosystems for scaleuparena, for Ensure Scale Up, for the SME market. What we're doing is trying to support those and ensure that everybody engages and communicates, connects, collaborates, cooperates, and ultimately closes business. Because if we don't, we won't exist tomorrow morning.
Absolutely, Mike. So I think we had a fantastic conversation today, and hopefully the governments, some of the governments may change. Indian government has already started changing. There still lots to cover, but I think there are other governments who can also change and bring in this concept of minimum government and maximum governance. I think your inputs are very, very valuable. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike.
Well, it's a pleasure, Chandra. Thank you very much.
They will also flourish. They will basically have a lot of things in common. So now I will tell you how to claim the mug that I showed you earlier, and that is you have to give your comments on the discussion we had today, and based on the comment, the best comment will actually get the this beautiful mug. It's not only the mug that you will get on your doorstep for free, you will also be given an opportunity to talk to Mike in the next program live on Akulmach Live. So guys, we look forward to your engagement and look forward to getting your comments. So for now, I say goodbye to you, only to meet you next time very soon.